Easter is a story about people in a plot that some things would change and some things would not. A plot driven with nails and posted on a tree. See, all things are being made new, but the cost is not free. Because the Easter story has a killer soundtrack, it's the clinking of silver and snaps of the whip cracks that begin to show amid the roaring of the crowd, from the bread and the cup that was lifted to the king's head that was bowed. Betrayers, deniers, and politicians all shout the same cry: the one who was born must be the one to die. Crucify, crucify. That was how they imagined the end for the teacher and prophet, known to befriend and defend the meek, the weak, the last and the least. Living water flowing down in blood from the highest of priests. Forgive us, for we not know what we did when we mocked him and beat him and then ran and hid. From our shame and sheathed from his glory, became the willing villains in the most tragic story of silence and bargaining for the highest price. A game of chance played with the roll of a dice, sending the unlucky savior to carry the cross, leaving us guilty, confused, regretful, and lost. As we watched his story end and our pages turned to epilogue, the aftermath of living in a world of darkness and fog, our hope turned to hopelessness. We are the left behind, resigned to the reality that hope is something we'll never find again. As the world would-be savior said, it is done. It is finished. Everything lost, no victory to be won. The story is simply over in a haunting single breath, that there's no plot to twist when the last sentence is death.
Wow. When I first saw Keontae's piece, I was just thinking to myself, I feel frantic, I feel kind of uneasy with the music and chaotic, and I thought, that's probably how Jesus felt Holy Week. Can you imagine his disciples having been heroes on Palm Sunday, and then 5 days later they're crucifying Jesus? I mean, can you get there in those 5 days? I mean, it probably felt a little bit like that. Welcome to Easter, and I'm so glad that you are here. Whether you're watching online or you're here in person, we're just going to celebrate the risen Christ together. This, as I said in the video earlier, this is my 30th Easter at Cornerstone, and I can't help being a little nostalgic. And I was thinking on the way in here about an Easter service that we had one time where it was very dramatic. And we had a large rowboat on stage. And we had this drama where Peter and John, two of the disciples, were supposed to be in the boat and having this conversation. They were arriving at the shore. In John 21, it says Jesus was cooking breakfast on the shore when they arrived. And as the drama was about to unfold, Peter was backstage waiting for his cue. And Peter, by the way, was kind of a semi-professional actor who was attending our church at the time, and he was really a pro. And he's looking around, John's not there. And the cue comes, and Peter goes, I'm going anyway. So he comes out on the stage, he gets in the boat. John's still not there. And he begins to say his lines. He's got it well rehearsed. It's very dramatic. John's not responding. Peter still goes ahead. John's out in the lobby talking to somebody the whole time. And somebody finally says to John, that's not his name, that was the character. He goes, aren't you supposed to be on stage? John goes, no. And so he comes running down the aisle, up onto the stage, jumps in the boat. And Peter never breaks character the whole time. He has been ad-libbing on stage like, wow, it's a beautiful day here in the Sea of Galilee. And the seagulls are buzzing around. Excuse me. Fish are jumping. And as John jumps in the boat, he goes, I thought Peter was the one that walked on water, but John, maybe you did as well, you know? And so it was just a fun day, and that's how Easter started that year. Easter is so much fun. How many of you participated in an Easter egg hunt of any kind? Anybody? Yeah, or planning on to after the service is over today? If you haven't hidden the dark chocolate peanut butter eggs, do that in my yard, okay? And we'll see if we can find those later. You know, it's always fun to search for an egg because every egg has a little treasure inside of it. And I was just thinking about searching. There was a story that came out in 1988, actually. A wealthy art dealer from Mexico. And maybe you've heard about this story. His name was Forrest Fenn. He was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He decided, because he had a life expectancy that was going to be shorter than he anticipated, that he filled a trunk, something like this, full of treasure, and hid it in a secret place in the Rocky Mountains. The only clue was it was north of Santa Fe. Okay, there's a lot of Rocky Mountains north of Santa Fe. The story was sort of an urban legend. A lot of people didn't really believe that there was this treasure, worth over $2 million, by the way, he said, full of gold nuggets, gemstones, other kinds of things that were worth a lot of money. And people said, it's just a hoax. He made that up. There's no real treasure out there. Well, in 2010, 12 years later, Forrest Fenn began to recover from some of the cancer treatments were actually effective. And so he wrote his memoir called The Thrill of the Chase. And in that book, there was a 24-line poem that was difficult to interpret, but it had the location of this treasure. That set off, from 2010, a mass amount of people searching the Rocky Mountains. There were people searching in Wyoming and Colorado, even all the way up to Montana. They were just sure that there was a treasure there. Actually, 5 people lost their lives by risking falling off cliffs and other kinds of things in the mountains. Fenn's treasure, some gave up and said it was a hoax after all. And all that went along, law enforcement was really upset because people were traveling through the mountains, risking life and limb. And everything went on as if it was a hoax until June of 2020. I think this is interesting. Just last June, a 32-year-old medical student from Michigan named Jack Stoof solved the poem and found and claimed Fenn's treasure and collected the $2 million. Fenn passed away in September of last year at age 90. You know, my guess is if you have probably never risked your life climbing through mountains in the Rockies on a quest like this. Some of us have done scavenger hunts. Maybe a few have done Pokemon Go, or you've done some geocaching or something like that. But most of us haven't done that kind of search for something. But I think the search for Fenn's treasure does have one thing in common with every single person on this earth. I really believe that we are all searching for something, and I really believe that with all my heart. I think we're searching for something. I think that's sort of the nature of being human and being created by God. You know, when you think about it, we fill up our calendars. Maybe we never said to ourselves, I'm searching for something, but we are busy all day long. Very few people get enough rest. We have activities galore. Our bodies are on the go all the time. And it's almost as if something's missing in our life that we're trying to find. What if I told you that maybe what you're looking for, the answers are in the resurrection story? I'd like to take us back to that first century. It was Sunday morning when Mary from the town of Magdala was on her way to the tomb. She didn't know it was that day. She was headed to visit a dead and buried Jesus. And as we heard in the poetry at the beginning of this, Jesus had been betrayed and arrested and crucified and buried, and he was definitely dead. His followers were devastated. They had devoted so many years to following this man. They literally lived, as someone has said, in the dust of the rabbi, and here they are, and it's all over. Can you imagine what was going through Mary's mind? What do I do now? I thought I had found what I was looking for. I thought the search was over. I'm sure they were all wondering that. And in John chapter 20, it says this: Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. And as she wept, she bent over and looked into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. And they asked her, Woman, why are you crying? They've taken away my Lord away, she said, and I don't know where they've put him. So Mary's confused. She's there looking for a dead and buried Jesus, and his body is gone, and she'll soon find out that because she's going to come face to face with Jesus just outside the tomb, she's going to find maybe the answer to what she's been searching for. In John chapter 20, and I want you to maybe go home later today and just read through that chapter. John's the fourth book in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. John 20, it's near the end of the book. Jesus actually asks 3 questions in that chapter. Maybe you've never picked that up or noticed it before, but I want to just share with you what those questions were, because I think they are not just questions he asks of first century people. I think they're questions he asks to you and to me. The first question is, why are you crying?
I'm crying because I'm grieving. I have experienced a great loss.
I don't have any friends and I feel alone.
I lost my job, and with it, my sense of security and purpose.
I'm scared that I'll get sick or someone important to me will get sick.
I'm anxious about the future and the unknown.
I'm crying because I still carry hurts from an unhealed relationship.
After her encounter with the angels at the tomb, it says this: "At this, she turned and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize it was Jesus. And he asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?'" So Jesus repeats the same question that the angels ask. Jesus asks, "Why are you crying?" I mean, it seems obvious, doesn't it? She's crying because of her Lord is dead, and there's this overwhelming grief of the weekend. But when I read that question, I almost wonder if it's not in the scripture because it's a deeper question than just the loss of life that weekend. I kind of wonder if God isn't trying to ask us that deeper question, if Jesus isn't asking you, why are you crying? Why are you sad? And I don't mean all of us are overwhelmingly sad. But you know what I find out? Almost every one of us carries some sadness deep within us. We carry some lament, something we wish could change. And I wonder if Jesus is not just trying to get at that pain that goes deeper than just the events of that weekend. You know, the weight of the pandemic has left a lot of people hurting, hasn't it? Yesterday, one of the workers at the nursing home where my mom was when she passed away a year ago texted me completely out of the blue and said, "This morning I heard the song, 'I Can Only Imagine,' and it reminded me of Dot and your mom, and it just made me smile." This pandemic has done a lot of damage. There are a lot of people struggling with mental health, with isolation, with being alone too much, with depression and anxiety, and relationships sometimes have been on the brink because of all the pressure. And some of you, like our family, have lost loved ones through it all. But I think the pain that Jesus is asking about might even go deeper than just this pandemic. I think most of us put on a smile and we try to brush things off, but down deep inside of us, a lot of us carry a wound with us. Some sadness, some pain. And Jesus is asking you, why are you crying? He's asking you to begin to identify what it was, what it is, what's inside of you. Have you verbalized it? Have you ever brought it to the surface? Just a few nights ago, my 92-year-old aunt, who was my mom's sister, called me from Orlando, Florida. And in the course of the conversation, she shared a pain with me that she has carried since she was 8 years old. And it just came out of nowhere, and she said to me, "I don't even know why I told you that. I never told my husband that." You see, a lot of us carry those kind of wounds deep inside of us. And Jesus is asking you, not because of any other reason other than he just cares deeply about you. Why are you crying?
There's no need to cover what I already see. You've got your reasons, but I hold your peace. You've been on lockdown and I hold the key. 'Cause I loved you before you knew what was love. I saw it all, still I chose the cross. You were the one that I was thinking of when I rose from the grave. Now rid of the shackles, my victory is yours. I tore the veil for you to come close. There's no reason to stand at a distance anymore. You're not far from home. I'll be your lighthouse when you're lost at sea. And I will illuminate everything. No need to be frightened by intimacy. Just throw off your fear, come running to me, oh. 'Cause I loved you before you knew what was love. I saw it all, still I chose the cross. You were the one that I was thinking of when I rose from the grave. Now rid of the shackles, my victory is yours. I tore the veil for you to come close. There's no reason to stand at a distance anymore. You're not far from home. You're not far from home. Oh, as you run, what hindered love will only become part of the story. Oh, as you run, what hindered love will only become part of the story. Oh, as you run, what hindered love will only become part of the story. Oh, as you run, what hindered love will only become part of the story. Oh, when you're almost home now, please don't quit now. You're almost home to me. Oh, when you're almost home now, please don't quit now. You're almost home to me. Yes, you are. Oh, when you're almost home now, please don't quit now. You're almost home to me.
Why are you crying? It's a good question, isn't it? The second question that Jesus asks in this chapter is, who are you looking for?
I'm looking for reconciliation in a broken relationship.
For life to just make sense.
For the world to get back to normal so I can do things I used to do.
I'm looking for some comfort in my loss,
I'm looking for unity.
I'm looking for safety.
a reason to hope.
I'm looking for meaning and purpose.
as the story continues in verse 15. "Who is it you were looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, Mary said, "Sir, if you've carried him away, just tell me where you've put him, and I will get him." I mean, it seems obvious again. She's looking for Jesus, albeit a dead Jesus. But Jesus knows Mary is looking for something more than a body, don't you think? Who are you looking for? It could easily have been, what are you looking for? Mary was kind of at a crossroads in her life. I mean, the last 3 years she had been following this rabbi, and now which direction does her life go? She has really no idea. Who are you looking for? What are you looking for? One of the things that I like to do when I meet new people is I ask them a question that often makes them feel uncomfortable, and it's kind of my role as a pastor, is just make you feel uncomfortable. And so sometimes if I meet a new person, I'll say, "So who are you?" People have no idea how to respond to that. So they usually begin with a litany of where they live, what they do, how many kids they have, any other facts about them. And I usually say something like, "Great, I appreciate knowing where you live, but who are you?" See, it's an interesting question. Who are you? How would you respond to that? And I think we define ourselves by the things that we do rather than who we are oftentimes. You know, the angel asks, or Jesus asked Mary the same question, you know. The angel asks Mary the same question Jesus did, but the angel asks it in a little bit different form. The angel says, "Why are you searching for the living among the dead?" And I think that is a great, deeper question. Why are you searching for the living among the dead? We search through dead things trying to find meaning for life. Isn't that interesting? I've heard people, I was watching a whole line of people buying lotto tickets the other day. And people were saying, if I could just win the lotto. But it's a dead thing. Trying to find an answer for life. I think we think if I can just, have just a better house in a better neighborhood. Again, trying to find something alive through something that's actually dead. And I don't mean a house is a bad thing or winning a lot of money is not a bad thing. Nothing like that. But they don't deeply answer the question of who am I searching for and what am I searching for? I think there's great symbolism in this question. Because I think Jesus' question is, who are you looking for? And almost all of us translate in our heads the what's. And you heard it from our actors just a second ago. We search through better jobs, and some of us work too much, maybe kind of searching for something, validation or affirmation or promotion, whatever it is. Sometimes we just get involved in non-life-giving relationships. Think about it. How much time do we spend in non-life-giving relationships? Unfulfilling activities. And Jesus is not asking the what are you doing or what are you looking for? He's asking us a who question. Is it possible the answer for so much of what we're trying to find from the inside out is in a who, not in a what? I think Jesus would ask these questions. Do you have a foundation for your life? Do you have someone who can truly comfort you when you need comfort? Do you have someone who will answer the questions that are deep within your soul, that can heal your broken heart, that can save you? That's the who. So instead of what are you looking for, maybe the question really is, as Jesus asked it originally, who are you looking for? And then that leads us to the last question in John 20. Jesus says, do you still not believe?
I want to believe desperately.
I'm not sure God still loves me when I make mistakes.
I just don't see people living out their beliefs. It's like they're just meeting an expectation.
I believe, but I need help when it's really hard to believe.
You know, I did some graduate work in Dayton, Ohio, and when I was down there, I realized Dayton was the home of the Wright brothers who invented flying. And there's Wright Air Force Base, and there's museums you can go to. And I was reading part of their story. You know, the Wright brothers worked in a bicycle repair shop, and while they were kind of confined to what was on the ground, they were dreaming all the time about how to make something like that bicycle fly. And they finally got it. They finally invented it. They had worked on it so hard. And that just as they got this first crewed airplane into the air and it was actually flying, a newspaper article came out written by a pretty famous astronomer at the time. His name was Simon Newcomb. And in the article, he said, "There is no substance or machinery by which men shall fly long distances through the air. It is impossible." And I'm thankful the Wright brothers had a dad who was a pastor, actually. And the dad saw those boys confined to the bicycle shop with these dreams of flying. And this is what he said to them: "Sons, just look at the empty tomb. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't fly." Jesus says, don't let anybody tell you that this is not the truth. Don't let anybody tell you you can't fly. Don't be afraid, just believe. You know, the New Testament, I think this is really, really interesting, and I just want you to focus on this for a moment. It was written in the Greek language. A lot of you know that already, but in this John chapter 20, John, who the author of the book, writes 4 different words for the word look or saw. And this is fascinating to me because in the English language, we tend to have just one word for that. I saw something or I looked. But in Greek, there are 4 different words. And so why does John use 4 different words? It says this in John, in verse 1, it says, "Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from an entrance." Mary races from the tomb back to where the disciples were. She tells Peter and John. They run to the tomb. John outruns Peter, but he stops right before going in, and Peter bursts right into the tomb. It says this: he bent over and he looked. This is John. He looked in and saw strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Both times, John uses the Greek word blepo, which means to casually look. Mary saw that the stone had been rolled away. John saw that the clothes were inside and empty. Blepo means a casual observance. Oh, I see that trunk sitting here on this table. It's kind of a no big deal. I just observe. You would do this all day long. You blepo things, all kinds of things all through the day. You don't think much about it. And you know, I think sometimes some of us approach the resurrection like this. Maybe you are not a believer in Jesus, that he actually rose from the dead, and that's okay. You're in a safe place, and I'm glad you're here. Maybe you're not very religious, or you're skeptical of religion, and that's all right as well. And I think a lot of times, many of us think about Easter as, what's the big deal? Yeah, I know the story. Some guy rose from the dead. Big deal. I blepoed that. I saw that. I've seen it before. Maybe there's something deeper here going on. The second Greek word comes a few verses later. It says, "Then Simon Peter came along behind him." That was John. Simon's having a little trouble getting there. And he finally runs, he's huffing and puffing, and it says he saw the strips of linen lying there. It looks to us the same word in English, but in Greek, John uses a different word. It's called theorio. Theorio is like, you can remember it by the cookie. It means to look carefully and to analyze. So Peter saw the trunk, and he went, wow, I wonder why that trunk is on that table. See, he begins to analyze it, and it's a little bit different than blepo. It's not a casual glance. And maybe that describes you. Maybe the resurrection has kind of piqued your interest, and you're kind of like, you want to look behind the curtain. What is really going on here? Did a dead person really come back to life? Theorio. Take a closer look. And I invite you to do that. I think the evidence is all there. The Bible invites you to take a closer look. And then there's this description of Mary. There's a third word. When Mary finally realizes it's Jesus in the flesh, she can hardly contain herself. It says this in verse 16, Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. This is after she had bumped into him. And she told them that he had said these things to her. Here, John picks yet a third Greek word. It's horao. It means to see and believe. It's like, I have to have evidence, and I saw him, I ran into him in the garden, and now I believe. Horao. It's the same word that's used at the end of the story when Jesus appears to the disciples, and Thomas, one of the 12, is not in the room. He just happens to not be there right then. Jesus appears, and Thomas won't believe them because he's a guy who needs evidence. He wants confirmation. When I see him and touch the nail prints in his hand, that's when I'll believe, he says. Maybe you have discovered some evidence somewhere along in your life. Maybe you saw it in the life of another person in your family or one of your friends whose life was totally changed. And you said to yourself, wow, that's evidence of the resurrected Jesus in somebody's life. But then there's this last word, and I actually love this one. I have a hard time saying it because I want to say the word pistachio, but here it is. The Greek word is pisteio. It means to see with faith. This is the word that Jesus uses at the end of John 20 when Thomas, who has been absent, comes back into the room and Jesus shows up again. And this is what Jesus says to him. Thomas, you have believed because you have seen me, horao. Blessed are those who have not seen me physically and yet believe, pisteuo. Wow. Blessed are those who have not seen me physically and put their faith in me. That's what he's saying. On verse 8, it says, finally, the other disciple. I love this. When Peter and John had run to the tomb, remember, John stayed outside. They get right to the tomb. Peter goes in, and he sees and analyzes it, theorio. John waits a minute, and then he goes in, and it says this, finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside, and he saw and believed. Pisteuo. What John saw was not a ball of linen on this cement slab inside the tomb. He saw the risen Lord. Very different than Thomas, who needed confirmation. John saw through the eyes of faith. John saw that Jesus was the treasure that he had been looking for his whole life. I love those words of Jesus when he said, the kingdom of God is like a treasure hidden in a field. Do everything to find it. Have you found the treasure, Jesus, in your own life? Have you looked through the eyes of faith and believed?
So what do you see when things don't turn out like you intend? Do you give up hope? Throw in the towel? Do you think this is the end? But endings are sometimes just as much beginnings too, and stories don't so much finish as they are to be continued. Just 3 pages to that final dark chapter. The narrative shifted for everything after the tragic drama that unfolded in this story up to that last breath becomes a comeback tale of victory over sin and death. We're all searching for something, that much is clear. to answer our questions, to give us direction, to bury our fears. The world's looking for answers. Everyone's playing the same game, but you, my friend, have been given the key that is found in one name, Jesus, the resurrected who conquered the grave, the name of forgiveness and hope and the power to save. Yes, morning turn to morning on that third and glorious day. Make no mistake, look again. The answer you seek is the light, the truth, and the way.